we had a nice talk last week, hopefully, about teshuvah and about some techniques that can be helpful for teshuvah, reframing the way we look at things a little. And primarily we focused on separating the person from the problem, so separating ourselves from the behaviors, etc., and about the benefit that that can have and how that can really help us set ourselves up to succeed a lot more in teshuvah. Now I want to go a little bit deeper into the whole teshuvah thing and to talk about, like, honestly speaking, how much does it really matter? Like, what does it really matter whether we do teshuvah, how much teshuvah we do? You know, honestly speaking, is there going to be that much difference in our lived experience the day after Yom Kippur, whether we did teshuvah or whether we didn't do teshuvah, or how much teshuvah we did or didn't do, or how good our teshuvah was, or how deep our teshuvah was, etc., how real it was? Right? Like, you know, hashtag real talk. Like, what difference does it actually make? What sort of teshuvah we do or don't do? And the answer is it makes a very big difference, but that's not really good. That's not really enough. That doesn't really help us much. Hi, welcome. So I want to make this a little bit more tangible than just, yes, doing teshuvah really does make a difference. Because if we can understand how and why and what that means, it'll make it a lot easier to be personally involved and to really connect with the process of doing teshuvah. Now, we're going to go a little deep, but I think it's going to really bring a lot more life and meaning into the idea of teshuvah and what we're working on now going forward through the month of Elul towards Rosh Hashanah, and then in the Aseres Yemei Teshuvah towards Yom Kippur. You know, and if a person, let's say, has a prescription for a pill from a doctor, for whatever it is, a person has some sort of pain, discomfort, illness, whatever it is, and the doctor gave a prescription for a medication. And let's say that the doctor gave me this prescription for 6 months and I need to get a refill. Each prescription lasts 30 days. Every 30 days I need to get a refill. And you know what? I ran a bit late and I forgot to take in my prescription and send it in for the refill, and I take it in today. I'm not going to get my refill until tomorrow, and I need to take a dose today. So you know what? I'll go through my closet. I have like some old medications, some leftover painkillers and Tylenol and Advil and some antibiotics, and I'll see if any of them look the same. Maybe I'll find one that looks exactly the same as the one the doctor prescribed. The same size, same shape, same color, same consistency. I'll take that one instead. It's the same thing, right? So it looks exactly the same. Clearly that's not a very good idea. Obviously. And hopefully everybody understands that that's very, to say the least, not at all a good idea. Why not? Because the thing that the pill is going to do for me is not determined, it's not the shape and the size and the color of the pill that decides what it's going to do inside my body. It's the substances, the chemicals that are in the pill that make it up, the active ingredients that are going to decide what it's going to do. And there could be many different active ingredients in different pills that look exactly the same and do completely different things. And the outcome of making a mistake like that, deciding to take a different pill just because it looks the same, could be catastrophic. Rahman al-Islam. So what happens when we actually take a pill? Why is it that when, if I have a headache and I take an Advil and it'll take away my headache, I take a different pill that looks the same, it won't? Because Advil has an active ingredient. It has ibuprofen. And when I swallow it and the ibuprofen gets dissolved, it gets absorbed into my blood, and as it circulates around the body in the bloodstream. And the nature of ibuprofen is that when it comes into contact, it's a molecule, it's made out of ibuprofen molecules, and when those come into contact with the right receptors in a nerve cell, it'll activate or deactivate or change the function of the nerve cell so it doesn't sense pain anymore. Right? That didn't happen because the Advil was red. It didn't happen because the Advil was circular. The proof, because there are circular Advils and there are capsules in different shapes, and there are gel caps and there are tablets, and there are red ones and there are different colored ones, and some of them have a sweet coating and some of them don't. None of those things determine what the Advil is going to do. It's the fact that there's ibuprofen inside. You have a different pill that looks exactly the same, but it has a different substance. It's going to do a different thing. Right? And the reason that, and I just want to reiterate and be grateful for the fact that we live in the time that we live in, when we're so fortunate to have such advanced medical technology, that there are things that even 50 years ago, for sure 100 years ago, would have been a death sentence for someone who got them. Pneumonia, 100 years ago, that was it. Shalom al Yisrael, it was all over. And now, Baruch Hashem, the vast majority of cases, you take some basic antibiotics and it's fine. We're very lucky, Baruch Hashem, we have all these different medications, and there are so many medications that they could get mixed up. Just a random side note, but it might be important at some point for someone. If you ever have a pill and you're not sure whether or not it's the one that you mean to take, there are websites you can find online where you could type in, like most medications have like some sort of lettering or numbers or something on them. You can type it in and it'll actually tell you what it is. It's done. So there's so much going on inside the body. The body's made up, we have systems, we have a heart, and we have a circulatory system with blood vessels that move blood around, and we have a nervous system, and we have an endocrine system, and we have an immune system, and all these things. All of these things are made up ultimately of different molecules, of cells. There's all kinds of things going on that we don't see. You look at a person, what do we see? We see a body, we see hair, we see a face, we see skin, we see eyes. But that's how a person appears. But the number of things that go on, right? We say in the bracha, Rofei chol basar mafli lasos. What does it mean, mafli lasos? We thank Hashem, Rofei chol basar, blessed is Hashem who heals all flesh, or mafli lasos, and does wonders. What are the wonders? The wonders are that if we had any idea how many things, the cells made up of, I believe the number is hundreds of trillions of cells. I'm not 100% certain, but it's a massive number of cells, and there are different kinds, and there are skin cells and blood cells and immune cells and muscle cells and liver cells, etc., etc., etc. And any one cell, which is microscopic, and you need a microscope to see it because it's so small. If you look at it under a microscope, especially a really high resolution microscope, each cell is like a full factory with thousands of different things going on at the same time. And every single thing that's happening inside a cell has to happen with precise perfection. And all the different things are connected to each other, and one thing happens in one system in the cell, it affects all the other systems in the cell that are happening at the same time. Everything has to be perfectly balanced. And that's just within one cell. And we have trillions of cells in the body at the same time, which communicate with each other through the blood and the nerves, etc. Everything, the number of things that are happening at any given instant in the body are mind-boggling. Right? People will ask, if someone's not feeling well, Rahman al-Islam, someone's unwell, ask, what happened? Really, the question should be, when someone is functioning healthy and well and there are no issues, it's like, whoa, how does that happen? The number of things that have to happen with unimaginable precision and perfection for a body to just be alive and for a person to be healthy is it's mind-boggling. And all of that's going on all the time. There are so many things that are going on, and we don't see any of that. You just see a whole person. All of that's going on behind the scenes. And that's why different medications do different things. They interact with different things. They might look the same, but it's a different active ingredient. And it's different active ingredients, same shape, same color, same size. It's going to do a completely different thing in the body. There are so many things happening in the body, and different active ingredients will interact with different parts of different systems and make completely different things happen in the body. There's so much going on behind the scenes. And when a lay person, a regular person, looks at another person, we see things very differently to the way, what a doctor will see when they look at a person. Let's step back just to illustrate this example that I would use for different things about the power of where we are and how that affects, the mindset that we have determines how we perceive things. Imagine someone's walking down the street and there's a crack in the sidewalk. There was maybe an old tree, and it had a big root that was growing under the sidewalk, and the root came up and the sidewalk cracked, and it has a big crack, and someone walks. You have 3 people walking down the sidewalk. One's just regular, normal person, and walks past and says, "Oh wow, look at that crack." And maybe a few people, and you'll have, a botanist who walks past and is fascinated by the tree and the root, and imagine how long it took for that to grow gradually and got so big that it was able to crack the concrete. And then you have a sports doctor who walks past and is just envisioning the injury that's going to happen to someone's ligaments in their knee if they trip and they hurt and they tear their ACL. It's not going to be good. That's what they're seeing. And the lawyer's walking past, and the lawyer's seeing the court case that's going to happen after the person hurts their knee. Right? Each person sees things differently. So when a regular person who is, isn't medically informed, let's say, looks at a person, we see a person, personality, character, etc. A doctor will look at a person, and even within doctors, right? A orthopedic surgeon looks at someone and sees bones and joints, and an endocrinologist looks at someone and sees all the different things that are happening and all the hormones and things that are going on around their body. And a neurologist looks at someone and is thinking about the brain and the nerves and the electrical signals that are going through their body. Each doctor with a different specialty, and that's what they think about. That's what they see in the person. And all of these things are true. There's so much going on inside a person, and all of them are true. We have a complete nervous system which is complicated enough that it could be an entire specialty. And you could have doctors who spend their whole life studying and training and specializing just in the nervous system. And you also have that for the circulatory system, and for the lungs, and just for the heart itself, which powers the circulation, and for the immune system, and for muscles, etc., etc., etc. There's so many different things going on, and each of them is its own world, and all of that is happening inside of us all at once, and all of it has to work perfectly together. The fact that a regular person who's not a doctor or interested in biology or medicine doesn't see any of that doesn't mean it's not true. It's all there. Right? Life's a lot simpler if you don't see all of that every time you look at someone. You see a person, it's simple. But the fact is that all of those things are there. And for ourselves, we don't feel all those things. Right? When a person's healthy, we don't feel the blood circulating in our blood vessels. We don't consciously feel our breath, hopefully. Most people were not even aware of the fact that there's a nerve system and there are messages being carried around our body with nerves. And all the different things that are happening in our body, and our kidneys are constantly filtering blood, constantly, doesn't stop for a second. All these things are going on constantly. We're not aware of any of it. Doesn't mean it's not true. And the fact that we're not aware of it consciously doesn't mean that it doesn't affect what we experience, because ultimately the conscious experience that we do have, the fact that we're able to sit and talk to a friend, or sit and read a book, or sit and daven, whatever it is that we're doing, our conscious experience is a result and an outcome of all these things that are happening, even if we're not aware of it. If any of those things, Rahman al-Islam, stopped working properly, it would affect our conscious experience very much. So even though our conscious experience isn't aware of those things ultimately determine the experience that we do have. They're behind the scenes. Most people aren't even aware that it's there. But that's what determines the experience that we have at the end of the day. And the same thing is true, the same way that it's true of each of us, that there are all these things happening inside that we don't necessarily see and that we may never be aware of, but ultimately they determine who we are and the experience that we have. This is true of the world at large, of reality. Right? There's what we see, what we experience consciously at face value. We get up, we wash negavasa, we daven, we eat breakfast, we go about our day, we talk to people, we do things, and we eat, and we sleep, etc., etc. All of these things are happening. That's what we experience consciously. That's what we're primarily aware of. But all of this that's happening is the result of an entire reality behind the scenes that we don't see, just like in the body. The experience that we have consciously in our body is the result of all of these systems functioning inside that we're not even consciously aware of. We don't feel them, we don't notice them, but without them we wouldn't be here and we wouldn't have any experience. The same is true of the world. There's a whole, way more behind the scenes than what we see. And ultimately, even though we're not aware of it, and when we'll get into it a little more, it's hard for us to even imagine, certainly understand. That doesn't change the fact that all of those things ultimately determine and are responsible for the experience that we do have. They make up the reality that we live in, our lived experience. Now, and knowing that this is all true, it's like, you could have someone who tells you about scuba diving and how amazing the experience of scuba diving is. And you go beneath the surface of the water and you see these corals and you see fishes that are colorful in ways that you could never imagine. And it just, it's like a whole world of color and vibrance and things that it seems fake when you see it at first. You're just like, whoa, where did this come from? Never knew there were so many colors in the world, in living things. Someone might tell you that it's there, but until you go scuba diving, if you're just standing at the beach and looking, it's like, okay, like apparently there's really nice stuff under the water, but right now all I see is a blue surface. And the same way that you can look at the ocean and you see how big the ocean is and it's infinite and it goes on forever all the way to the horizon and there's no end, it's massive. But you could be missing out on that, however big that ocean is. There's all of that in 3 dimensions underneath the surface, and all we're looking at is just the 2-dimensional surface of that, missing everything that's underneath because we don't see it. Then the moment you go scuba diving, it's like a whole new world. You now see 3 dimensions, a whole universe that's under the water that we didn't see before. We just saw that the ocean is big but had no idea of what was going on underneath. So it's a similar thing here. We can know that all of these things exist, that there's all of there's systems and things that are happening behind the scenes and that it all makes a difference, but that's nice. Well, what does it mean? And what I'd like to do is try to see if we can a little actually go scuba diving and dive beneath the surface and try to see things a little more 3-dimensionally. In terms of reality. Try to make our view of reality and our perspective of reality a little more 3-dimensional, like with scuba diving, instead of just looking at the surface. So, going back in time, we're coming up to Rosh Hashanah. That's what we're talking about, leading up to Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah itself actually doesn't commemorate the creation of the world. It commemorates the creation of Adam Rishon on Erev Shabbos. Right? Rosh Hashanah is actually the first day of Tishrei was on the 6th day of creation, the day that Adam Rishon was created. The first day of creation was the 25th of Elul. But either way, the season commemorates and is aligned with the creation of everything. And if we just take a step back, wind the clock back 6 days before the first Rosh Hashanah, before Hashem created the world, there was nothing. There was no time, there was no space. There were no malachim, there were no angels. There was nothing. There wasn't even nothing, if you think about it, because nothing is a concept. But before Hashem created, there was no concept of nothing. There was no empty space because the concept of space didn't even exist. So usually if you would say there wasn't nothing, I happen to be very picky about language. I get very irritated if someone said there wasn't nothing, because there was nothing. But actually, before Hashem created the world, there wasn't even nothing. Even nothing didn't exist. There wasn't anything or nothing, neither of them. Nothing. There was just Hashem. The only thing that existed was Hashem. And then Hashem decides, right, the Medrash says, why did Hashem create the world? The Mechilta says that Hashem had a desire that there should be this material world in which Hashem's presence is concealed, is hidden, and then we, through our thought, speech, and action, should bring Hashem into the world. Why? right? Nisave was a taiva. Hashem desired. Hashem wanted. In Yiddish, there's an expression we say, "Af a taiva is kin kasha nicht." Can't ask what, I'm in the mood of chocolate ice cream. Why? What do you mean why? I'm in the mood. I don't know. Can't ask someone why they want something, why they're in the mood of something. If I tell you there's a good reason, you can ask me what's the reason. But if I say I feel like it, there's no reason. I feel like it. Hashem feels like having this world and that we should bring him into the world. The problem is that Hashem is infinite. Hashem is immeasurable. And then how do you get from Hashem that's infinite to a chair, to a pen, to things that are so limited and so finite? There seems to be a very big gap between Hashem, Ein Sof, infinity, and the things that make up the world around us. So there's an expression that comes from a very ancient Sefer of Kabbalah, Avodas HaKodesh. And it says that Kutsha Bricha Shleimusa Dekula. Hashem is absolute infinity. Right? When you say that something's infinite, it has no limit, there could be relative infinity, which means it's infinite relative compared to something else. Right? When it comes to numbers, for example, you can draw a graph mathematically. You can draw a graph that continues forever. It goes to infinity. So this graph, this line is infinite. It doesn't stop. It goes past 1 million and 1 billion and 1 trillion and 1 gazillion. It keeps going. It's infinite. It's infinite as far as numbers are concerned. But it's not a chair. It's not a tomato. Right? It's not absolutely infinite. It's infinite within the context of numbers. As far as numbers are concerned, it's an infinite number of numbers. It's infinite in size. But you can say that this is a graph that it depicts numbers. It doesn't depict things. It doesn't depict people. So that's relatively infinite. It's infinite relative to 100, relative to 1 billion, relative to 1 trillion. But Hashem's not, when we say Hashem is infinite, it doesn't just mean he's bigger than everything else. Because bigger doesn't mean infinite. It could be still limited. Hashem isn't limited by anything. Right? There's a story about in Yeshiva, in Tomchei Tmimim, a few generations back in Europe, there was a mashpia who was teaching Chassidus, teaching Pnimius HaTorah, and he asked one of the Bachrim, what's Hashem? What's the Eibishter? What's God? And the Bachur's like, I don't know, what am I supposed to say? He can't say anything. Oh, well, I don't know. And he says, come on, get over yourself. Like, just tell me, like, what's Hashem? What's Hashem? And he keeps on pushing him, and the student doesn't want to say, he's like, what am I supposed to say about Hashem? Whatever I say is going to be wrong. It's not going to be enough. And he's like, come on, say something, say something. And the student says, okay, fine, Hashem is, and the teacher slaps him across the face. Point being, anything we say about Hashem is wrong. Because whatever we say, if you say something is big, that means it's not small. That's a limitation. You say it's infinite, that means it's not finite. It's unlimited, means it's not limited. Which means you're limiting it to being only unlimited and not being limited. And to do that about Hashem would be kfirah. To say there's something that isn't in Hashem would be denying Hashem's oneness and completeness and infinity. So there's nothing that we can say doesn't exist in Hashem. And so what this Sefer says, it says Hashem is shleimusa dekul. Hashem is absolutely complete and infinite. Just like Hashem has the power of infinity, Hashem also has the power of limitation. Because if Hashem could only be infinite but couldn't limit, then that would be a limitation. Hashem is only infinite but can't limit. So we start off with infinity. Hashem is infinity, effectively. But Hashem wants to have a world that's very limited and everything is finite and defined. So Hashem, the Creator, removes... Familiar with the word Simsum? Heard of the word Simsum? Simsum is a Hebrew word which means contraction. Hashem contracted, which means it's like Hashem removed himself from space. Now obviously there's no place that Hashem is not present, but Hashem made it as though he's not there. Hashem's ability to limit made it created the possibility of a space in which it seems like Hashem is absent, in which Hashem's presence is concealed. It seems like Hashem's not there. And once it seems like Hashem's not there, now Hashem creates things that are limited. I mean, imagine that we would see Hashem, the infinity of the Creator. Everywhere we look, we'd see the infinity of the Creator. Our existence would basically be useless. There'd be no point. There'd be no challenges. There'd be no concept of achievement. Everything would be perfect. It wouldn't even occur to anyone to ever do anything wrong or not do something right. And it would defeat the whole purpose. So Hashem's ability to limit creates the possibility that there could be a space in which it's as though the Creator's not there, as if Hashem is absent. And now there's room for a reality to exist in which there's no awareness of Hashem. It doesn't seem like Hashem's there. Hashem has limited himself, removed himself, not actually removed himself, but made it seem like he's not there. And there are many layers. I don't know whether any of you have heard the terms Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, different worlds. What these are, basically, are different layers of reality in which there are different degrees of awareness of Hashem's presence. So Hashem creates this space or this layer of reality in which there's a limited, let's say, a limited awareness of Hashem's presence, of the presence of infinity, of the Creator, of God. But there is some awareness. And the world of Atzilus is the first of these layers. Atzilus comes from the word Eitzel, which means next to, close, in proximity. So in this first layer, the reduction is not as big as it could be. And so there's still, relatively speaking, a lot of awareness of Hashem. It's close to Hashem. It feels Hashem. So in this layer of reality, this first layer of reality that Hashem created, Atzilus, there's a lot of awareness of Hashem. There's not so much of a sense of self, not so much ego. And then Hashem further reduces the awareness of his presence. And then there's a second layer of reality, which is called Bria, in which there's less awareness of Hashem and a greater sense of self, a greater ego. And then and each of these is a whole reality. And then Hashem reduces further and creates another layer of reality, which is Yetzirah, formation. There's less awareness of Hashem than Bria and more sense of self. And then there's Asiya, the world of action. And the whole reality that we know, physical space, physical time, the whole entirety of the universe that we think of when we say universe, all exists within the one lowest of these layers. Everything that we know is only one of these layers. Now, when people, if I would ask, do angels exist? According to Torah, according to Judaism, according to Yiddishkeit, do angels exist? Technically speaking, you could answer yes or no, and both of them could be correct, depending on what you mean. Because obviously we have stories in Tanakh, we know that malachim exist, that they're real, that angels are real. But what do you mean by exist? If by exist you mean exist physically, they're made out of physical mass, and they're a part of the physical universe, the answer is no, angels are not. Does an angel exist the same way that a chair exists, the same way that a table exists, the same way that our bodies exist? No, it doesn't. It's not a physical entity. An angel's not a person. The reason we don't see angels isn't just because they're invisible. It's because they don't actually physically exist. They're not physical beings. It doesn't make them any less true or any less real, but it does make them not physical. They're not a part of the physical universe. They exist in a different layer of reality. And there are times when Hashem allows those rules that define the different layers to be overridden, and that angels can enter this layer of reality, which we have. There are stories of malachim interacting with people. Those are exceptions to the rule. And if we think about the way that it works, this whole system, we talk about the universe, the universe that we refer to with the term universe is one of many layers, right? Multiverse is a term that's used in science fiction, but really there is a multiverse. The whole universe that we know of is one layer. It's just the layer in the world of Asiya. There's a whole additional layer of reality that we don't experience. It's not physical. That's the world of Yetzirah. And there's another whole layer, which is the world of Yetzirah, which is the world of Bria, and another whole layer, the world of Atzilus. And then there are all kinds of things happening before those layers begin to exist. And all of this is referred to as a term Hishtalshelus, which basically means that it's like an evolution. It's a process. Right? Without Atzilus and Bria and Yetzirah, without the earlier layers, each of those layers is a stepping stone to get here. Because to get from Hashem, from infinity, that we can't even describe because anything we say won't be true, won't be accurate, to get here, there have to be a series of layers before we can get here. And each of those layers is a precursor. We wouldn't be here if those layers didn't come first. So everything that exists in this world, and just think about the number of insects, the number of animals, the number of plants, and then all the number of things that exist under the water in all of aquatic life, and break all of that down and zoom in to the point where you get down to cells and to molecules and to atoms and protons and electrons and neutrons. All of that complexity exists in an equivalent, non-physical way in the world of Yetzirah, because that's where it comes from. Our world evolved from Yetzirah, which is a previous layer of reality. And everything in Yetzirah comes from its previous form in the world of Bria, of a higher layer of spiritual reality. And then all of that comes from Atzilus. And then all of that comes from everything that was before the Simsum. So, the same way that when you look at a person, you see a person, a face, a body, hair, eyes, skin, but everything you see is only there because of all the things that are happening beneath the surface, inside, behind the scenes, that make that person be a person. We wouldn't be the person we are if we didn't have a brain and nerve cells and all the things that the nervous system that are going on in the nervous system, which in itself is made up of who knows how many cells, each of which has so much going on inside. And the circulatory system, and the red blood cells that are carrying oxygen, and then the white blood cells that keep our immune function going, and the muscles, etc., etc., and the liver, and the kidneys, and the spleen, and the pancreas, and the list is endless, depending on how deep down we want to go and how much we want to zoom in. All of that's real and important. We wouldn't be here without any of that, even though we don't see it. We might not be aware of it. But that's what makes us who we are, and it's the same thing here. All of these things that happen behind the scenes, we could go through our whole life without ever knowing there's such a thing as spiritual layers of reality. Even if we do know that there's such a thing, it's hard enough to just imagine and relate to the concept in a real way. We could go through our whole life not even being aware that they exist. It doesn't mean that they're any less important to who we are, because those are the steps between Hashem, between the Creator and our reality, our universe. And without all of that, our universe wouldn't exist. That's what defines and determines everything that happens is a result of everything that happens before in previous layers. And it's all, those layers of reality are the same thing as everything, in a way, like everything under the surface of the water. You can go your whole life without ever realizing, without ever knowing that there's a whole world under the surface of the water. If you just put on some goggles and an oxygen tank and just go swimming in, it's a whole new world. It's the same thing. There are all these layers of reality that we can go on without knowing. That doesn't make them any less important. Those layers of reality are what make our layer of reality what it is. They make the universe what it is, and the universe wouldn't be what it is without them. But it goes in two directions. So the Mizritcha Magid, there's an expression we say, it's in a lot of shuls. You'll see sometimes in a shul on an Amud where the Chazan daven, sometimes you'll see it on an Aron HaKodesh. Da mala mala mimach, know that which is above you. Which generally is saying, just be aware of Hashem, be aware that there's a Creator above. Especially you come into shul, you come to daven, you come to pray, you come to connect and to have a personal interaction with the Creator. Be aware, know that which is above you. The Mizritcha Magid retranslates that and says, da, no, Ma'ala ma'ala, that which is above, all of that which is happening above, the angels and the spiritual things, and Atzilus and Bria and Yetzirah, all these different layers of reality, mimach, comes from you. Our actions determine that which happens in all of these spiritual layers of reality. Every single thing that we do, the same way that if you throw a rock into the water, as far as we're concerned, we threw a rock, it landed in the water, it made a bit of a ripple, but what happened? The rock continued down beneath the surface, and it starts to get the water moving beneath the surface, and it might bump into a fish that's beneath the surface that swims off and bumps into something else, and there are ripples moving through the water, and it starts affecting all these other things in a world that we weren't even aware existed. Everything we do has an impact. Everything we do affects the angels, affects the other layers of reality, because they're different layers, but it's a chain. Shalsheles means a chain. It's hishtalshelus. It's a series of links, but the links are, even though the links descend and each link is separate to the other links, the links also interlink with each other, and when you shake the link at the bottom of a chain, the tremor travels all the way up the chain. It's a shalsheles. So this hishtalshelus, this evolution, it's not separate layers, it's a chain, and whatever happens at one point in the chain affects all the other layers, all the other links in the chain. And everything we do, for example, think about if someone's unwell, and technology today is amazing, the way that we can organize tefillas and people yidden around the world davening for someone that we've never met, never heard of, didn't know existed, and all of a sudden you have thousands of people, tens of thousands of people around the world davening for someone. Why is giving Sudaka for the schus of a person to feel better? What's happening when we do that? We can look at it in a number of different ways, all of which are correct, but they're different ways of seeing it. One is that we daven, we ask Hashem to make the person get better, and hopefully Hashem will listen to our prayers and make the person feel better. And when people will learn Torah and say Tehillim and give tzedakah, all of those things. What's happening when we do that? It's more than just we ask Hashem and Hashem answers. It's a lot more complex than that. There's a lot more going on. We give tzedakah, it's a mitzvah. We do something that Hashem asks us to do, whether it's tzedakah, whether it's learning Torah, whether it's saying Tehillim, whatever it is. That action has an impact on the universe. Anything that happens in this universe, da ma'ala ma'ala mimach, everything that happens above comes from us. The thing that we do in this universe has an effect, an impact on the higher layers of the universe. And there are chain reactions and things start happening. And the same way that things travel up, they also travel down. So when we give tzedakah, we learn Torah, we say Tehillim, we daven, all these things we do, they have an impact that it affects our universe. It affects that impacts the shalsheles. It travels up the chain into other layers of reality, and things happen, and it travels back down. There are changes that happen in the fabric of reality and the fabric of all the layers of the multiverse, which then travel down and have an impact on a person who needs a refuah, for example. So everything we do really does make a difference. Now, bringing all of this back towards teshuvah, which is where we're going, and what difference does it really make? The same way that physically, in terms of our bodies, as far as our bodies are concerned, there are all these things going on beneath the surface that we're not aware of and we don't realize and we don't understand, most of us. But ultimately, those are the things that make us who we are. They keep us alive. They make us the person we are. They make us have the experience that we have. Every person is made of a body and a soul, a guf and a neshama. And a body without a soul, a guf without a neshama isn't a person. And a soul without a body also isn't a person. A person is a body and a soul together in partnership. That's what a person is. And all the things that exist in the body and are true have an equivalent in the soul. They are partners and they're a match. It actually talks about in Sfarim, in texts, about the fact that one of the ways that a soul might be punished is by being put into a body that doesn't match it. It's the wrong kind of body that it can't partner with, and then it never gets to express itself, And that's a punishment that could be a form of punishment for the soul. So they work together. Each of us is a body and a soul, and we can't differentiate between them in our experience because they become one in a person. They make us who we are. And all the things that exist in the body and the guf are also true in the neshama, in the soul. The soul also has all of these different layers and things that are going on, and it's equally as complex. And the soul is equally a part of who we are, even though it's harder to relate to than a body. We can touch the body, we can feel it, we can see it. We can't touch or see or feel the soul, but it's equally real and it's equally a part of who we are. And the same way that our actions travel up the chain through different layers of reality, our actions affect our neshama. And the same way that when a person takes an Advil, they can't see what the Advil's doing, which is why a person might make a mistake and say, well, I'm out of Advil, but I have this other pill. It looks exactly the same. I might as well take it. Same color, same shape, same size. Why not? Bad idea. Because the thing that makes the Advil take away the headache is something that we don't see. It's not the shape and the size and the color that make it do that. It's something else that we don't see. We can't see what it's doing, but it doesn't make a difference whether or not we can see it. It still does the job. It's the same thing when we daven. It's the same thing when we learn. It's the same thing when we do a mitzvah. We don't see the impact that it has, but it is real. And the same way that we don't see what the Advil does, but it makes a difference to our experience, and we may never understand why. Right? When a patient goes to a doctor and says, I have this problem, I have this pain and this discomfort, and the doctor says, okay, ask questions, okay, I'm pretty sure this is what it is, take this medication. And most people are just going to say, okay, thank you. I don't understand how it's going to help. Does the fact that I don't understand how the medication is going to help me, does that make it help me any less? Doesn't make a difference. I don't need to understand how it works for it to help me. And let's say that I do ask the doctor and say, well, how does it work? What's it going to do? And let's say the doctor says, listen, I'm really sorry. I have a lot of patients waiting. I'm not able to explain it to you right now as much as I'd love to. Or you know what the doctor might even say? The doctor might even say, you know what, honestly, I don't know. I just know that the research says that this medication helps this problem. That's what I know. If a patient's going to say, well, if you don't tell me how it works, I'm not going to take the medication. Well, it's not a very clever patient. It doesn't hurt the doctor if I don't take the medication. It's not a punishment. I'm not threatening the doctor. Say, if you don't tell me how it works, I'm not taking it. Because if I don't, it doesn't matter whether or not I know how it works. If it's going to help, it's going to help. I don't have to see what it's going to do. It can still change my experience and make my life better, even though I don't understand how, even though I don't see what's going on. And it's the same thing. Everything we do has an impact. The mitzvahs, the averos, the things we do right, the things we do wrong. It has an impact in this layer of reality. It has an impact all the way up the chain. And the things that travel up and travel back down, and it has an impact on our body, and it has an impact on our neshama, on our soul. And even though we don't understand what a soul is, we can understand to a degree, but we'll never relate to it the same way that we relate to our bodies. It's always going to be abstract. It's always going to be distant and difficult to understand and relate to. That's the way it is. That's the way it's supposed to be, for whatever reason. It doesn't change the fact that the soul, that the neshama, is part of what makes us who we are and affects the experience that we have. And if a doctor says, take the Advil, take the penicillin, take the insulin, whatever it is, you don't have to know how. It doesn't make a difference. If it's gonna affect our experience and make it better, then it's gonna make our experience better, whether or not we understand how or why, whether or not it's happening beneath the surface and we can't see it. So teshuvah might seem like it's this abstract thing. It's like, oh, says to do teshuvah, I'm supposed to be sorry, I'm supposed to make things better, I'm supposed to turn things around, I'm supposed to teshuvah, return to who I really am, as we talked about last week. Come back to who I really am, realign my life so that it matches the person that I really am, because ultimately we will always be that person and that will never change. Does it really make a difference? It really does. It does make a difference. Imagine that someone comes from a country where there's no medication. Or, someone, let's say that someone, was frozen in the year 1800 and then they were defrosted now in 2020. and they wake up and they have a headache, and you tell them, take this little ball and put it in your mouth with some water and swallow it. They'll be like, well, what are you mad? What, some little white ball's going to make me feel better? Like, yeah, actually it is. Might seem crazy to you, right? To us it seems natural already because we're lucky enough to live in the time when we have this technology. But for someone who's coming from a different time, it's like, well, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, doesn't matter. Just take it and it's going to make you feel better. It does make a difference. It will affect your experience. The idea of teshuvah and even having a soul and what a soul is and what difference, it does make a difference. These things make a difference. And taking the right medication as opposed to the wrong medication, even though they look the same, it makes a very, very big difference. Taking the wrong pill just because it looks the same is a bad idea. Taking the medication will make you feel better. Taking the right medication in the right dose will make you feel better. It does make a difference even if you don't understand how or why. Because it's going to interact and have an effect on the things that happen inside that we don't see and that we're not aware of. But the fact that we're not aware of those things beneath the surface doesn't mean that they don't matter. Because those are the things that the systems inside our body ultimately make us who we are and define the experience that we're going to have. And that's true of the neshama, of the soul, as much as it's true of the body. And it's true of the health of the soul as much as it's true of the health of our body. It may not seem like getting our neshama, our soul, into a state of better health is actually going to affect our life. We may not understand how or why that's going to actually make a difference to us tomorrow or the day after Yom Kippur or the day after Rosh Hashanah. But the fact that we don't see how and why doesn't mean it doesn't make a difference. The neshama, the soul, is part of who we are. In the same way that you don't see what a pill does, but it does it and it's a good idea, because ultimately the things that we don't see still define the experience that we have. The health of our neshama, the health of our soul, defines the experience that we have, and it makes a difference. That's who we really are. The neshama, the soul, is who we are. And the neshama is ultimately, it's a part of Hashem. Right, we say in morning blessings, in brachas in the morning, Elokai neshama shenasata bi tahora, the neshama, the soul that you put into me, it's pure. It is a part of the Creator. It's a part of Hashem. It's a part of God that God has taken and placed inside of us. And that's who we are. And again, it's hard to be aware, it's hard to imagine, it's hard to visualize, but that doesn't make it less true, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't make a difference. That defines who we are. It defines our experience. It defines our identity. And taking care of the health of the neshama, same thing again with exercise. Doing exercise, going for a walk, going for a run, whatever it is, we don't see the difference. But the fact is that doing exercise will make our heart stronger. It will make our blood vessels more elastic. It can reduce cholesterol. All these things that we don't see and we're not aware of are happening. And ultimately, you know what? You start exercising regularly. You don't know why, but you start feeling significantly better pretty quickly if you do exercise regularly. It's the same thing. We don't see the changes that are happening inside, but the changes happen and they affect our experience. And even though we may not understand how it works, how the soul works, how this part of Hashem that's inside of us works, the fact is that getting it into a state of better health will affect our experience because it's a part of who we are. It's equally a part of who we are as our body, and it determines our experience as much as our body does. Getting the body into better health affects the way we feel and our conscious experience, even if we don't know why. Getting our neshama, getting our soul into better health affects our experience, even if we don't know or understand how or why, or even what it is. And the power of teshuvah is, it's the same thing as exercise and diet and medication and detox and all these things for the body. That's what teshuvah is. Teshuvah is a detox for the neshama, for the soul, which is a half of who we are. It's, again, even if we don't get how it works, doesn't make it less real. That defines the conscious experience that we do have. It's what makes us who we are. It's what makes our experience what it is. And Even if we don't get how and why, it's a good investment. Working on the health of our neshama is at least equally as valuable as working on the health of our body, because both of them together make us who we are. And even if we don't get how or why, it doesn't make it less real, and it doesn't make it less impactful. And going now forward to Rosh Hashanah, this is the month of Elul, when we have this power that we talked about, the king in the field, etc. It's like, for the body, it would be the equivalent of someone saying, now obviously this equivalent doesn't exist in reality, although there are plenty of ads all over the place that will try to convince you that it is, that their product will make your diet 500% more effective, and this product will make your exercise 500% more effective. It doesn't work that way. The exercise that you do has the impact that it has, and the way that we eat has the impact that it has. But the month of Elul gives an increased effectiveness to the effort that we invest into the health of our soul, into the well-being of our neshama, into teshuvah, into preparing for Rosh Hashanah. And the effort that we put in now, specifically over the next few weeks, in the lead up to Rosh Hashanah, has a disproportionate impact, a much bigger impact on the health of our neshama and the health of our personality and our character and who we are, than it does the rest of the year. We can always do teshuvah, but the impact that we can have on our spiritual health, which is 50% of who we are, at least, now is a time when we can really make the most of that and have a much greater impact than we usually would the rest of the year. L'chaim.